Hello, EdTech 510. Welcome to a segment here called Mitch Makes, where we're going to actually create something. This video is actually meant to be aimed at a amateur maker, somebody who's got themselves a 3D printer and is maybe starting to get out of the place where they want to just make things that they found on Thingiverse and download it and want to maybe do some of their custom CAD modeling. Additionally, we're going to go through a design thinking process here. We're going to go through a design cycle, actually, one iteration. I've already done the first iteration before we started here, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And we are going to then take this into Fusion 360, and we're going to take that file and we're going to put it into a 3D actual physical object and review how it works. For those who've been through a design process before, we start with the empathize phase where we ask, what is the thing that the problem that we're solving, what's the environment, what's the context. And my problem right now is that you're looking at me from above. This isn't a great look. We've got my webcam up here, it sits on top of my screen. If I put it down on my desk, it's a really unflattering angle for me, and I think I should probably have it facing me pretty much straight on, but as you can see from my setup, that's not really possible. It's not something I can do here. So we're going to actually make a bracket to attach this webcam about eye level so that I can actually look at it head on and get a much better angle for these videos. That's the problem, that's the context that we're going to solve, and we're going to define the problem as exactly that. That's our second step, is define, where we are going to define that we're going to actually make a camera to go just above eye level for me here. Now, ideating the design, you can see that I've already sketched out a few different ideas here. I've actually been through the process here once and created one prototype, which is our next step, where we actually prototype a specific model. We prototype something that we're actually going to try out, and that first prototype looks something like this. It kind of worked, but it actually fell down consistently on the side of the monitor, so we need to modify that a little bit and probably make a brand new design for this. Finally, we test the thing. Obviously, we've been through a testing phase there and determined that the first one didn't work, and we're going to test this one as well. So let's get to Fusion. Fusion 360 is an Autodesk product that I use with students because it's free for any student. If you're a MET student right now and you want to try this out, feel free to download it, feel free to start tinkering. And again, this is for the amateur maker who maybe is tired of having things on Thingiverse they've downloaded and they want to make something custom, something for their particular context. The steps that I've taken before getting to this step is I've actually measured the bezel and the size of my screen, and I've actually got some dimensions on what I've got for it. Now, jumping over to Fusion 360, let's get started on a process, and I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. We're only going to use a handful of tools to get somebody started in this program. And again, any MET students that want to follow along, please feel free to actually download this and follow along. I've got my file system along the side, and I've already created a new project. I actually have a UBC project here, and my first iteration is actually kicking around here. And I've got a few parts that I've downloaded. We're not really going to worry about those, except to say that the parts that I've chosen to use, because they are bolts that I had sitting around, are a 1/4 by 1/2 inch bolt, which actually fits onto the bottom of the webcam. You can get those at any hardware store. And I also have an M4, a metric 4mm by 40mm long bolt, again, that I just happen to have kicking around because I teach robotics. And we're actually going to be using them to attach this bracket together. So we'll come into my design process here shortly. We have a brand new file here. We're very quickly going to save it. We're going to call it webcam clip v2. And again, I already have that first version that I created, but we're going to make a slightly better version than this. So let's walk ourselves through the steps here. Now, everything in Fusion starts with a sketch and then turns into a 3D object. So we're going to start with a really simple sketch here. And I'm going to start by drawing a couple of construction lines. Now, construction lines are over here. And a construction line simply allows you to create a line that isn't going to actually have any bearing on your drawing. Now, why would we want that? Well, we have to measure a few things here. For example, the thickness of my screen at the edge is 21mm, and the front of the bezel is 14mm. I measured these all with my calipers before we started this process here, and if I go back, I've got about 7mm back until I hit the screen itself. This is going to be important because it's going to reflect how we're going to actually draw this thing. Now, I've drawn a couple lines out here. I'm just going to keep them along here so that we can see that is roughly the shape and size of the screen and the edge of the screen that we're going to be attaching this object to. Now, I'm going to draw one more reference line here. Actually, I'm going to draw a reference rectangle. And this rectangle is also going to be a construction line. I'm going to make it 4mm across and 40mm long. This here is to represent the bolt that we're actually going to be using to bolt this clip onto the screen. We're simply going to make something that goes together like a clamp, and it's going to hold pretty well. So let's make our actual clip here, and let's make this happen. So now that I'm done with my construction lines, I can turn construction line off. I'm going to draw the first actual object here that I know I need. And the first thing I know I need is a 0.25 inch, and yes, I am mixing metric and imperial here, bolt. And that bolt is going to be for actually putting my 1/4-20 bolt through and actually bolting the webcam too. Now, just looking at my webcam, I'm going to give it a quick measure here. Know that I need this clip to be at least 50 millimeters out from the screen itself. So I lied, I'm actually going to draw one more construction line on the way out. I'm going to make that construction line 50 millimeters. Those who are astute here notice that that's not a construction line, and as soon as I click on it and click the button, now it is. I'm just going to move my bolt over to the end of it, because now I know exactly how long my clip has to be. Now, if you see, I got a whole bunch of construction lines here. I'm just going to select them so they're a little easier to see on the screen. I've got my bolt here, I've got my screen over here, and I've got the hole that I'm going to have for this particular bracket over here. I'm going to spike another circle around this just to give myself some 3D printed material to work with to hold this thing up, and then we're really simply just going to extend some lines out from this. I'm going to drag a snap point line from the top, and again we're going to try to do this whole design with circles and with some lines. We're going to keep this real simple. Okay, I'm just going to drag this line out to an indeterminate point. I'm going to run it back about here, and I'm just going to create a little bit of a clip here, like so that we have something to attach to our monitor. I'm actually going to take the other end of this. I'm going to move this. I'm actually going to delete this line. I'm going to redraw it. I'm going to make it a little bit narrower. I'm going to try to actually make it parallel with. I'm just going to cheat here a little and use a parallel constraint here, and actually just make these two lines parallel to each other. Excellent. Now those should be able to pull together. That won't be very thick 3D printed plastic. We're going to do the exact same thing on the front. I'm going to take a line here. This one, I'm going to actually put a flat spot on the front of the line, and I'm going to draw a little bit of a clip on the other side of the bezel here, just to make sure that I get this. Now the goal here is to cover as little of my screen as possible. That 3 millimeters might be too much. I'm going to take it down to 1.5. Now I'm just going to draw a line out here, and again, specifics don't matter too much on this one right now, because we are just looking for an overall shape on this right now. And since it's come close to the screen, I'm actually going to make a little bit of a clip. Again, I'm going to make this just a little bigger than the screen. I don't want this to be a super tight fit. And I'm going to make it about 3 millimeters deep, and just draw a really quick triangle here. And again, the goal here is to use really mostly only our line shapes here and our circles so that we can keep this real simple. I'll use one more tool up here at the top called trim, just to cut out the line so that that becomes one solid shape. And use that same tool over here to cut out two sides here. Now, we've got a really simple caliper type shape here. I actually really like this shape. I think it'll work really well for what we need. And so what we're going to do is we're going to finish our sketch. Now you'll notice that I get all those things that I just drew. They are in 2 dimensions, but they're in a 3-dimensional space. So by clicking this extrude button, I can very simply drag this into 3 dimensions. I'm going to press -5. That's going to give me a 5 millimeter clip, which I think I'm going to need 7. I think I'm going to make it a little bit bigger because I'm going to have a 4 millimeter bolt going through it. So I want to make sure I have a little bit of space for that. Now, we got 2 more things we need to do here. The first is we need to put that 4 millimeter bolt through here, and the second is we need to make a little bit of a bracket so this doesn't tip down on the side of the monitor. As per our drawing, we had that in there. First of all, I'm going to do a new sketch, and for the 4 millimeter bolt, you'll notice that I have these actual coordinate planes, and I like these planes. They're going to help out here. We're going to click the plane here that is going to give us the best angle on where we actually have to put this, this bolt. Now, you'll notice that that clip, that little triangle we created, is going to be really useful right here. We're actually going to create a circle, and that circle is going to be 4 millimeters across because that's the size of our bolt. And we're simply going to drag it over here. And I'm going to zoom around just so I can see. I want it to be just outside that triangle and right through the middle of this. Now, I could line this up exactly, but for what I'm doing right now for the amateur maker, this doesn't have to be exactly precise, so let's go ahead and let's actually extrude that. And we're going to extrude it all the way through, and you'll notice that because it goes through a solid object, it's now going to cut a hole in it instead. I'm going to make sure it goes all the way through, and we're going to press enter. There we go. Now we've got something that actually works, is going to work pretty well for us to actually put a bolt through, use this as a caliper to clip this together. Now the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually put a bracket or a little triangle so that this can't fall down. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put a new piece of material here. We're going to put it right next to the the actual caliper here, the actual front of this. And to do that, we are simply going to put a projection. We're going to use that project tool again. And we're just going to project this front out here. And then we're going to draw a really simple triangle straight down. You can see that I've got a 90-degree angle there, which is good. I'm going to go about 25 millimeters, just enough that we can get this to move. And then I'm going to drag this back over to create that very simple triangle. Then I'm going to go finish my sketch. I'm going to drag my extrude out to create that shape there. And you can see that it kind of lines itself up there with the caliper, which is about what I need, and it's going to prevent anything from kind of moving backwards on this one. Now, what I'm thinking here, I'm going to actually finish this off, and I am going to cut off a couple pieces that I don't need. I'm going to draw a new sketch on the top. I'm going to use that same project tool that we have in our create menu here, and I'm going to project out this piece and this piece, finish my sketch, and I'm really simply going to do one last extrusion, just pulling these down to cut off those extra pieces. And that's going to get us something that kind of matches the aesthetic of this. It's not altogether displeasing, and is probably going to act as a really good caliper to actually hold my webcam. Now, to show this as a 3D printed model, we need to move it over to, in my case, Cura Slicer, or whatever slicer you have. And to do that, I'm just going to take it and turn it into an STL file. I go File, first I take this body 1, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create components from bodies. Components are kind of like finished products. I'm going to go File, and go down to 3D Print here. Under 3D Print, it's going to give me some options. The first one I'm going to check off is right at the bottom. I'm going to uncheck the Send to 3D Print utility, which is the default. That's in millimeters, so that's good. I'm going to click on this as the object. From there, I press OK. I choose where I'm going to save this. And I'm going to call this webcam clip. From here, it's simply a matter of moving it over to your favorite slicer program. That STL is created, and it's ready to go. We're just going to delete what's on the plate here. And go File, Open, find your 3D printer folder, and take the new file that you have from the 3D printer. There we go, nice webcam bracket. Let's spin this around for easy printing. And let's put it on our printer. Slice this and get it going. Well, there we are. As you can see, you're looking at me straight on. I got my bracket, I've got the camera mounted right about the level I want it to, and here's some pictures of what got created in the end. Obviously, I added a couple of improvements afterwards, and you can see that there was a longer design process. I actually went through 5 iterations of this after the original one that I showed you how to use in Fusion 360. However, all the tools that I used are the same ones that we used in Fusion 360, just changed a few things here and there, and in the end, solved the problem that we using the design thinking process. And I hope you learned something about this 3D printer. I hope you learned something about the process of design using the tool of Fusion 360, and I know I learned a lot putting this together. Thank you for this Playing for Design project.